welcome to the Alumni House podcast. My name is Matt.
I'm the Quacker.
Quacker, we have got a doozy tonight. Of course, this is the Vault episode 4, and the last Vault episode we are going to be doing before what, Quacker?
Before football season.
Before
it's here.
Football season. It is here. As a matter of fact, as we record this now on August the 14th, we are what, just 9 days from Farmageddon, which surprisingly is a halfway decent week 0 game. Of course, last year we got a great week 0 game when a top 10 team was upset in Ireland. We just didn't know it was going to be a great game. So all right,
Yep.
so. This one, before we jump into it, this one's special for our family, really for Quacker. We're going to be talking about one of USM, the University of Southern Mississippi's golden moments, and they've had a lot of them, not as many in recent years, but as mid-majors go, they have just about as rich a football history as any of them do. I mean, some could argue it's as good as Boise State's. It's just not as recent because in the last 10 or 12 years, it's been pretty pathetic. But well, not always pathetic, but pathetic, relatively speaking. But USM was always one of those teams. As a matter of fact, I thought for a long time, in my like teens and early 20s, I felt like USM would be the perfect fit to move to the SEC eventually. But then, after Bauer left and then, whoever it was right before Fedora, and then Fedora had his little run. And then after that, it's kind of been, let's skip
More
most
missed
of
than
it.
hit.
Yeah. So, and it's really sad because that's that program deserves better. But the reason this is special, especially for Quacker. So I'll let Quacker. Quacker, why don't you tell us why this is special, and then I'll explain why it's special on my end.
Well, so my mom graduated from Southern. She actually graduated 2 years before this game. I graduated from Southern. One of our aunts graduated from Southern. And then our other 2 aunts went to Southern. They just didn't graduate from there. So, if you can't tell, there's a lot of Southern in our family.
Yeah, and so tell me real quick, how far is Macomb from Hattiesburg?
It's about an hour and a half. Yeah. It's
Okay.
So 80-ish miles.
For those of you who don't know, which is probably going to be most of you, Macomb is where our parents grew up, and Hattiesburg is where the University of Southern Mississippi is. And so for me, it's special because my dad also graduated there. In fact, I am wearing my dad's class ring
Nice.
tonight in honor of this episode. That's a really cool thing, and if he were still around, he would love to listen to this one, because I'm sure that he, along with your mom and the rest of the aunts and uncles, probably all remember this to varying degrees. But yeah, so anytime
My mom has talked about this game my entire life.
Yeah.
Like ever since I was little, she's always talked about this one.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, Quacker and I both have our teams that we cheer for. But both of us now, with Quacker being an alumni, it's even more so. But we both always are cheering in the background for USM, and so that's really cool. And we both grew up, hearing stories. Now, this one was not one I heard as much. The one I always heard from my dad was Brett Favre beating Florida State. So I didn't mean to bury the lead there, but what we're going to be talking about tonight is a game from the 1982 season when the Southern Miss Golden Eagles played Alabama, coached by
The Bear.
Paul Bear Bryant. So in Alabama's first run of incredible success, So that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. Any final thoughts before we jump in?
Uh, not really. I mean, this is going to speak for itself when we get into it. So I don't want to bury too much of the lead here.
Okay. All right. Well, let's jump in. All right. So, like I said, we're going to be talking tonight about the if I can get my mic right, we're going to be talking about the 1982 Southern Miss Alabama game. So, here we go. All right. So, every team, every program has at least one game that goes down as a program defining game. Lots of programs have more than that, but every one of them has one, even if it's a negative, not a positive. But speaking of negative, think about the 2007 Michigan versus Appalachian State game that saw the number 5 Wolverines go down to the then FCS. Actually, I think it was technically at that point it was Division I AA level App State Mountaineers, or the 2007 Fiesta Bowl when Boise State upset Oklahoma. Well, the University of Southern Mississippi, that game took place in 1982. The 1982 Alabama versus Southern Miss football game is one of the biggest upsets in program history and arguably college football history. That last part is a bold claim, but there's some merit to it. Okay, so before we move on, I want to take a little detour for just a second since we're talking about major upsets. Okay. So the 2007 season, you just mentioned, two games that took place in the calendar year of 2007, but it's actually, I've always hated the way they do this. They call it the 2007 like bowl season or whatever, but it wasn't the 2007. It was the 2006 Fiesta Bowl that was played in 2007. So, I was in college during this period. I think you might have been too, but so this was sort of the prime of my like college watching days. And where I was going to school at the time, I'll start with the Fiesta Bowl. I was driving home to my parents' house because it was sometime during the holiday. I mean, the holidays were like basically over, but it was somewhere around there. And I remember thinking how cool that was, but I hated, and I still hate it to this day when teams do it. I hated that they went for 2 to win the game. Now, the play worked, but I love, the 7, 8, 9 overtime games. I don't know if there's ever been 9, but my point is I love those long games that never end, except when you're waiting on your team to play and the game before you is going to like the 5th overtime. That's the only time I don't like it.
Right.
But that was an awesome memory. Now, fast forward to the 2007 Michigan Appalachian State game. So, like I said, I was in college, and every Saturday I would have a ton of people over to my apartment, and we would have just like a party, and we would watch football. Well, this particular game was the first game of the season, and so we had a huge turnout. Like any given Saturday, typically we're gonna have 15 to 20 people at that apartment. This particular day, we probably had like 35 or 40 because everybody who isn't there every week, wasn't going to miss the first week, right? So we're kind of flipping through the different games, and this is back when there were a handful of games that you wanted to pay attention to in the first week, but they weren't like these like special Chick-fil-A kickoff games. I mean, they were just home and home, like good games. So I remember vividly, and I'm going to say vividly, and then I'm going to tell you that I don't remember the circumstance of the game, but I remember vividly with I don't know, a minute or a minute and a half, something like that. Appalachian State did something to either give Michigan the ball or something that indicated to me that game was over. So we turned it off. Like we all of us in the room agreed that it was best that we turn it off. And so I was texting with my friend. No. My friend Jason, who called me. And he was like, man, what a great Saturday. And I was just like, yeah, I just wish Appalachian State would have won. He said, dude, I'm here and they did win. So we flipped it back and we see the celebration. So We had just gotten, me and my roommate had just gotten DVR in that room, so I rewound it because I was recording that game. Because back then you could. Makes me sound like a cave troll. Back then you could only record two things at a time, two live things at a time. So I didn't set that game to record until it became a good game, like in the fourth quarter. So I set it. So then I rewound it. But back then, nowadays you have the benefit of, like, if a sporting event goes long, your recording will go long. Well, it didn't do that back then. So I rewound it, and I did get a little bit of it. But we were able to go back and watch the end of that game. But I just remember being in disbelief. Now, if I remember correctly, Michigan would go on to not have a great season that year, so the game became a little less special. But it was still, it was still just one of those moments you're going to remember where you're at. I mean, honestly, I think it's a lot like Vandy beating Alabama last year.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a little disrespectful to Vandy because, like it or not, I mean, while they're not, a mid-level or upper-level SEC team, they're a Power 4 team. So that is a little different from a division below you beating a top 5 team.
Yeah.
But still really cool. So real quick before we move on, share if you have any specific memories from either one of those games. Share them, because I think this is important to put in context what we're about to talk about in a game that you were alive. I wasn't even alive yet, but you weren't old enough to remember anything. So, putting into context, some of these games that we do remember, I think will help kind of set the stage and paint the picture for this game.
Yeah. So I remember the Fiesta Bowl. I was at my apartment with some friends. I think that was my first year at Southern. And it was that game that you just, like you say, you're watching it, you're like, I don't want this thing to end, and all of a sudden it does. And it was an awesome ending. You still remember the running back proposing to his girlfriend on the field afterwards. And then with the Michigan App State game, I can remember being in my truck. I think one of my cousins was in the truck with me because we were getting ready to go to the Southern Miss game that night, and it came over the air that I think I had XM at the time, and it came over the radio that App State had just won the game. And we were just like floored that it happened. I mean, I can remember looking at Best Buy, and because we were headed, I want to say to my sister's apartment at the time, and it was just like, what just happened? I mean, I can't believe this. It was insane.
Yeah, and one thing, I don't know, you probably remember this because you were big into this stuff back then too. But so this was back when the iPod video was pretty big, and the iPod video was basically go look up an iPod, but it had a color screen, and the screen was about this big, and you could watch videos on it. Well, Apple had started this. Apple and Fox, because Fox had this couple years group of BCS games, and Apple and Fox had a little deal where you could buy each of the BCS games like to keep. So I still have
some of them.
Yeah, I still have them. I bought them all from that year. But I watched that one in the national championship a bunch, and the reason I watched the national championship a bunch is because it's still funny to me to see Ohio State supposed to dominate a game and get completely dominated. But the Fiesta Bowl I've watched a bunch, and if you gave me 5 minutes, I could probably tell you what both of the analysts are saying for the final play. But that just took me back because obviously now things are so different. You just pull out your phone and you can watch it live.
Right.
But yeah, that was cool. I watched a lot of the BCS games. I watched Smallville and I watched Lost on that iPod video. And that's just about all I watched were those things. But all right, so that was a little detour, but I think it was a good one to kind of get us in the zone. So let's jump in. All right. So in 1982, the Alabama Crimson Tide were in the last season of their legendary head coach Paul Bear Bryant's career. The Bear had led the Crimson Tide for 25 seasons. Gosh, I didn't know he was there that long. And in those 25 seasons, he had been mildly successful, winning 232 games as the Tide head coach. He won 323 total games, 13 SEC championships, and 6 national championships. His Tide also had a 57 game winning streak at Bryant-Denny Stadium, renamed in 75 from Denny Stadium to BDS, having not lost in Tuscaloosa since 1963. And I'm glad you put this in here because I was about to say it. Now, there's a caveat to this 19-year home unbeaten streak. Half of their games were played in Birmingham at Legion Field or in other cities around Alabama. So we would have to look this up because I don't remember specifically. My brother-in-law is a huge Auburn fan, and we've talked about this a number of times. My understanding was that it wasn't necessarily half, but it was like any big game was played at Legion Field.
Yeah.
Now, like the Iron Bowl was always at Legion Field, at least all of the Alabama Iron Bowl, like hosting. It may be that all of them were.
It was all of them to like the 89 season or something like that.
Okay.
So
yeah, but at any rate, to Quacker's point that he put here in the notes, that is take that a little bit with a grain of salt because they didn't play all of their home games at Bryant-Denny. But all right, so Bears' first game as Alabama head coach was played at Ladd Stadium in Mobile versus LSU, who would win the national championship that season. This was done for a few reasons, including Legion Field having a larger capacity and it being an easier location for fans and opponents to get to. They would not play their last game at Legion Field until 2003 when they opened their season against South Florida. On that field, the Tide was led by QB Walter Lewis and running back Paul Ott Carruth, who was born in Hattiesburg, by the way, where Southern is, and also went to the same high school as Quacker. So interesting thing about Legion Field. So it's got a new name now. So what happened was, it basically the same thing happened to Legion Field that happened to the Citrus Bowl. Basically, both of these stadiums had been around forever. They were dilapidated and basically just in complete disrepair.
mm-hmm.
The Citrus Bowl has been completely redone, but Legion Field they completely tore out all of the upper decks at Legion Field, and then put in some smaller upper decks and completely refinished the stadium. And now it looks like a brand new stadium. And I know that because I have to drive on I-20 frequently, about once a month, and I drive right past. I mean, it's right off the interstate, so I see it every time I'm driving there, right in Birmingham, across from UAB's hospital wing, and of course it's the home to the Blazers now, and it's not called Legion Field anymore, but that is the legendary Legion Field, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I've been there once, and it was still Legion Field, and it was not fixed up at all. It was.
Yeah. I've never been in the stadium. I've just driven by it a bunch of times.
Yeah, I went for just tell you how old it was. The PapaJohns.com bowl game. It was Jeff Bauer's last game as head coach for Southern Miss.
Okay. Hey, I've got a question for you. Do you, while we're talking about old stadiums, do you remember the old name? Because there's still a game there. Do you remember the old name of the bowl game that took place in Mobile? It was always 2 mid-majors, but it was one of those odd games. Back when, the major bowls, you'd have like 10 major bowls played on January 1st, and then there was that one odd mid-major matchup that was like on the 5th or 6th before the national championship.
Right.
Do you remember what that game was called? Because I went to that bowl game once.
I don't. Was it the Mobile Bowl? I don't.
No, it might have been at one point when I went there. It was. I was just curious if you knew. Um, but anyway, that's not important. But we were talking about old bowl games and stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry that some of these bowl games, they've been so many.
they come
escapes.
and go.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious, so I'm just gonna look it up. So I'll let you know what I find.
All right. So in 1982, for the Southern Miss Golden Eagles, they were in their first season under head coach Jim Carmody, and they were playing as independents. So it's quite the juxtaposition between teams and coaches. Jumping back a season, Southern Miss had played Alabama at Legion Field and played them to a 13-13 tie, while in the 1980 season they played at Bryant-Denny Stadium, and Alabama had a slight marginal win with a 42-7 drubbing of the Eagles. During the season, USM would play and lose to Ole Miss, Auburn, host and lose to Florida State, and host and beat Mississippi State before hopping on the Greyhound and headed to Tuscaloosa on November 13th, 1982. Just a few days before the game, UCM would be placed on probation by the NCAA for recruiting violations under the previous regime. The Eagles wouldn't be eligible for a bowl game again until after the 1984 regular season. On the field, Southern Miss was led by their legendary quarterback, Reggie Collier, who became the first quarterback in NCAA history to rush and pass for 1,000 yards in a season, a feat he accomplished as a junior in 1981. Other standouts for the Eagles were running back Sam DeJounte and wide receiver Lewis Lips. Now, as for the game itself, the Eagles jumped out to a 21-7 first quarter lead over the number 15 ranked Tide behind the legs of Collier and DeJounte and the Nasty Bunch defense, which forced several turnovers on the day, including a fumble on the opening drive of the game. Collier would score a touchdown on Southern's first drive with a 22-yard quarterback counter. The Eagles would score on their second drive after DeJounte broke a 60-yard run against the Tide defense, and he would punch it in a couple plays later on a 3-yard run. And Alabama would finally get on the board when Lewis would hit running back Joe Carter for a 33-yard touchdown pass. The Eagles would again punch it in with a touchdown on the third drive on a 10-yard pass from Collier to Mark Means, who was, I believe, he was the tight end, pushing the Eagles' lead back up to 14 with a first quarter score of 21-7.
All right. And in the second quarter, the Eagles would expand their lead to 21 with an 11-play drive that saw them cover 95 yards. Collier would account for his third touchdown of the day when he ran it in from 5 yards out on a QB sweep. The Eagles led 28-7 with 9:19 left in the first half. Alabama would respond, though, with a long scoring drive of their own when they put together a 15-play, 80-yard drive that resulted in a 1-yard touchdown run on a bootleg from Alabama's second QB of the game, Ken Cooley. Alabama would close the gap a bit, 28-14, but the score would stay unchanged for the rest of the first half. Going into halftime, Southern Miss held the 14-point advantage, which in and of itself is a feat. So moving to the third quarter, something you don't see very often, Southern Miss kicked off again. I think I've seen that. I think I've actually witnessed it happen once, and I also, so funny story about this. So I played intramural flag football for my junior college, which is when you play against other schools rather than other like clubs or whatever in your school. And the year before I got to my school had won the national championship in flag football. So they were really good. The coach was really good. And we went into our first, and the way you do tournaments, you don't have like a season. So we had this big tournament that was hosted by us. So it was in Pensacola, but like Alabama was there, Auburn was there. There were a bunch of majors. I think Michigan even brought a team down. It was a national tournament. Well, I got elected as one of the captains for the first game. And I walk out there, and I've never been a captain in my life. Played football growing up, never was a captain. And what I didn't realize, so they won the toss, and they deferred, and the ref said to me, "Do you want to kick or do you want to take the ball or decide which way to go?" And I said, "We'll decide which way to go." Because what I didn't realize is if you don't take that choice in the first half to take the ball, they get that choice. So we went up having to give them there's no kickoff. So we gave them the ball to start both halves, which was my fault, and I got in a lot of trouble for that. But anyway, that just reminded me of that because that I've only seen it in one game, and then it happened to me. But anyway, so they kicked off again. In the first half, Carmody chose the wind option on the coin toss because their defense had been playing well the last few games, and they thought they could get a stop. Well, in the second half, they took that same strategy, and it didn't work again. At least he had a reason. So it sounds like he did it on purpose. I just did it because I thought, I don't know what I thought. So on the first play from scrimmage, Bama's fullback Ricky Moore took the handoff, and he ran into the USM defensive end Richard Byrd, who forced Moore to fumble, and the ball was recovered by USM linebacker Greg Hausler at the Alabama 21. Southern Miss would score 5 plays later, all runs. Something you don't see much anymore. The 5 straight plays that are all runs, in the red zone. When DeJarnette would bust into the end zone from 3 yards out to expand the Eagles' lead to 35-14. And in the words of the legend, Keith Jackson, say it for me.
Whoa, Nelly.
Alabama would respond on the following drive with a huge kick return out to the USM 43. 9 plays later, they would get into the end zone on a 1-yard dive from fullback Craig Turner. On the PAT attempt, the snap was bad, and holder Paul Fields had to scramble away from the rush. He heaved the ball up where Alabama's Mike Pitts grabbed it for a 2-point conversion, cutting into the Eagles' lead 35-22.
All right, so in the fourth quarter, Alabama would get on the board one last time. This time it was a 4-yard touchdown run by Paul Caruth. This cut the Eagles' lead down to 6. The Eagles leading 35-29. The Eagles get on the board one last time, this time with a 23-yard field goal by Steve Clark with 5:10 left in the game. And the Eagles' defense would be able to hold on to keep the score right there for a final of 38-29. So
35-29, right?
What that was.
I see.
Yeah. So 38-29. After the game was over, Alabama players, when asked how they had lost, credited Collier as a catalyst to the Eagles' win. Alabama linebacker Robbie Jones said, "I can't explain it. I just don't know what to say. Collier. That's all I have to explain it." Bear would add his own comments. There was a great deal of character on the field today. They are for real, no doubt about it. This was no fluke. Speaking on Collier, Bryant would state that Collier's just a super athlete. He's just did a super job. He makes it a one-man game in crucial situations. When he has to have some yardage, he can take the ball himself and get it. The Bear also is very, very complimentary of the Eagles coaching staff, saying their staff did a great job getting them prepared for us. As a matter of fact, I think their preparation had a lot to do with their winning. I expect that if we went out there and played them again, they'd beat us again. They're a fine football team, and they're for real. They're no doubt about it. This is no fluke. Bryant was shocked at his team's defensive inability to stop the Eagles' offense in the game, telling the media, "I would have never thought that we could score 29 points in that stadium and lose."
Yeah. As for Southern Miss side of things, Carmody said this win had to be one of the greatest in USM's history. Running back Sam DeJarnette, a Selma, Alabama native, said, "This is hard to realize and very hard for me to describe. I do know I'm happy right now. This is probably the greatest victory for me, coming back to my home state and winning one. That's special." The impact.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
What I didn't put in the notes is DeJarnette transferred from Auburn to Southern after his first year in college. So, he started out in his home state. So,
Okay.
Yeah,
that is pretty cool. So the impact that this game had was actually quite large, as Bear Bryant added it to his reasons he retired at the end of the season. The win snapped Alabama's 57-game home winning streak at Bryant-Denny Stadium, which, as stated earlier, went back to October the 12th, 1963, when Alabama lost to Florida 10-6. This game also marked the first time since 1972 that the Tide had lost back-to-back games, having lost the previous week at Legion Field to LSU 20-10. The Tide would play Illinois in the Liberty Bowl at the end of the season, where they would win their final game of Bear Bryant's career. The Liberty Bowl was still a younger bowl game, this being the 24th edition of the game. Alabama won the game 21-15. After the game, Bear Bryant would announce his retirement. The date was December 29th, 1982. And famously, he would pass away exactly 4 weeks later of a heart attack on January 26th, 1983. The Bear was 69 years old when he passed away.
So Southern Miss would only defeat Alabama 2 more times since the 1982 game. The first one was in 1990, led by some guy named Brett Favre. The Eagles would beat then 17th ranked Tide 27-24, and then in 2000 the Eagles would win in a shutout 21-0 when Mike DuBose was in the final season as the Alabama head coach, leading them to a stellar 3-8 record in his last season. DuBose lasted, I think, all of 3 years. He was kind of a disaster for the Tide there.
Yeah. And that kind of led into the, well, anyway, I don't remember his name. I wasn't going to mention. I didn't think it would be good to mention it, but yeah, the guy in between them who never
Price.
coached the game. Yeah.
Mike
So,
Price.
but what I was going to say was the end of the Mike DuBose era. See, they won the SEC title in '99, but I think 2000, the year you just mentioned, they were preseason like top 5. I think they might have been number 3, and they went 3-8. Back then, you played 11 games, which was crazy. Because the year before they had, you remember who their running back was in '99?
Was it Shaun Alexander?
It was Shaun Alexander. Yep. And so they had, they had him and a handful of other guys, but that led into, the next 6 years after that kind of being an Alabama fan's worst nightmare. Really, after Gene Stallings left, they were kind of a nightmare until Saban got there. But man, so what a cool moment. I remember. I'm trying to think of some of the coolest moments I've seen like that. We mentioned Vandy beating Bama last year. But there have been a handful of these that we remember, and obviously many that we weren't around for. But it's such a special thing. And for those of you who aren't us and have the benefit of coming from our family, that kind of, this game sort of encapsulates how we grew up, watching Southern, now, like particularly in our younger years, I think as we got into our teens and 20s, they were certainly one of the best mid-major teams, but they weren't upsetting a lot of the big teams, but mainly because they kind of they typically, when they played big teams, and when I say big teams, I mean like ranked teams, they were normally playing like top 10 teams. Like I know you and I went down to Gainesville one year and watched them,
Hmm.
and that was the year that was one of the years that Florida won the national championship, and the game wasn't terrible. It was like 33-10, or I don't know what the score was, but it wasn't
It
like
was a 10-point Florida lead in the fourth at the start of the fourth quarter. I remember
okay.
that.
Yeah, I don't remember a ton about I remember a lot about the day. I don't remember a lot about the
Hmm.
game. Um,
I
but
got to see Tebow score his first touchdown.
yep,
I'll always remember that.
yep, and it was right in front of us. We because we kind of had
Yeah.
weird seats, so we were like on like the 10 or 15 yard line, right in front of that end zone where he ran his touchdown in, and so yeah, but my point is that like it wasn't that Southern was not upsetting teams because they were bad then. It was because they just sort of always seemed to play like LSU or Florida or Alabama or Notre
Hmm.
Dame or whoever it is when they're really good,
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so what are some of your thoughts just going through that?
Yeah. So this game, I was way too young to know anything about it, but having always heard about this game, um, it was neat to go back and I'll tell you, trying to research this game was a pain, but from everything I could find on it and the clips I could find, there wasn't many. Uh, it was one of those where if you were alive and a fan of the team at that time, you could remember it. It's definitely one of those things that sticks with you forever. It was just, I mean, Southern had played them to a tie the year before. They were in that era of just being that giant killer program, and as of course as an independent, they were playing all these big schools in the South. So you know, this was kind of always expected to an extent, to go in and compete against these programs and stuff, but to actually go in and win at Bryant-Denny Stadium, where a team had not won since '63. I mean, that was one
Mm-hmm.
of those things that you know put a feather in your cap for your career right there. Um, I don't imagine Jim Carmody had to buy too many meals in Hattiesburg for at least the time there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure that they didn't. So just a quick update. So I am 99% sure that so I'm 100% sure that the bowl I was talking about way back at the beginning of the episode was the GMAC Bowl.
Okay,
That,
I remember
by
that.
the
Yeah.
way, it was called the Mobile, Alabama Bowl in '99 and 2000, but I the year I went, it was the GMAC Bowl,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
and it was either 2004 Bowling Green versus Memphis, 2008 Tulsa versus Bowling Green, or 2005 Toledo versus UTEP. Pretty sure that Bowling Green was involved in the game. However, I don't know for certain. But and that game is now the 68 Ventures Bowl. Um, so yeah, yeah, it's fun to see. It's fun to hear the stories. And of course, where I grew up, in pretty close proximity to LSU, USM, Florida State, Auburn. All of those were and Florida. All of those were within about a 3.5 to 4 hour drive from where I grew up. So I heard lots of stories about all of these schools, and so because of that, the one that I obviously always heard about was Favre beating Florida State.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was sort of when Bowden had already made Florida State something because he got there, I think, in 79, and that would have been
Right.
what, 91 or 92, something like that. But that was when Bowden was just about to take Florida State like all the way to the top. Like they were kind of in like that second level of rising, and then here comes little old Southern Miss with this guy with a funny last name, and beats them. So
Mm-hmm.
that's cool. All right, well, look, these Vault episodes have been a lot of fun. It's been really cool to go back and revisit games from the past. And if you weren't with us, we talked about the walk-off game between LSU and
Miami.
Okay. I couldn't remember. It hasn't even been that long. The baseball game in the College World Series. We also talked about the Rose Bowl featuring Texas and Michigan that was the game before the game. So obviously from the 2004 season, so the 2005 Rose Bowl. And then the last episode we talked about Auburn's miracles that occurred in the twilight weeks of the 2013 season, and then wrapping up with this. So it's been cool, and hopefully we'll get to do a little bit more of this, a lot more of it in the future. But we're not going to be able to do any of it until about June, because we are 2 weeks away from college football and the NFL. Which we talk college sports here, but I'm a huge NFL fan, so that's a huge deal to me. Then we jump right into college basketball. Then right on the heels of that, we have college baseball starts during college basketball.
Yeah.
So we're not going to have a lot of time for that, but that's good, because the reason we're not going to have a lot of time for that is exciting.
You'll actually have live games to talk about instead of games from the past.
Yeah, we will. We'll have a lot of live games to talk about. So, Quacker, are you going to be at every home game for Southern this year?
I've got my season tickets, so yeah. Unless something bad happens, I'll be there.
Cool. Well, that'll be exciting.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to the 11 o'clock kickoff week 1 against State. I'm looking forward to the game, just not the 11 o'clock kickoff, because it's going to be 1 billion degrees and
that's
billion
against Mississippi
humidity.
State.
Yeah.
But that's in Hattiesburg.
In Hattiesburg.
Wow. So have they come to Hattiesburg before?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what year it was. I wasn't there because I had gone to our family reunion up in Indiana. And State fans tried to get their cowbells in, and Southern was like, nope. And they had trash cans full of cowbells. So State fans weren't happy about that. So if you're a State fan, don't bring a cowbell to Hattiesburg, because it's not getting in the stadium. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know that there was a period of time in the 2000s, and I don't know how long it lasted, where the SEC actually banned the cowbells, so they weren't even allowed in I almost said Duty Noble. I forget what the football field is called, but they weren't even allowed in the stadium. Now, Davis Wade. Now, there were lots of people who got them in, but they would be confiscated by some ushers, not all of them. But now, of course, they've lifted that, which I think that's ridiculous to ban something like that, because it's a unique tradition there. I think you and I have talked about this, because you typically watch the World Cup, right, when it's on?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember the 2010 World Cup in South Africa with the or that might have been the Vuvuzela or something? That might have been 14. It was either 10 or 14. No, it was 2010. It was 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because 14, I think, was Brazil, if I'm not mistaken. That was the one that Clint Dempsey scored the goal in like 30 seconds or whatever. But anyway, yeah, I mean, though that was, I still, all these years later, 15 years later, remember that about the World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think things like that make sports special, and you got to let it happen.
Yeah.
Like for instance, we talked about Southern Miss all night. So Southern has this thing that and Quacker can explain it. But like all these schools have their sayings, like whether it's Roll Tide or Go Tigers, the GEAUX or whatever. Well, Southern Miss has or Mississippi State is Hail State. Southern Miss is it's what is it? It's Southern Miss to the top, but SMTTP, right? So
TTT, yeah.
TTT. I don't know why I said TTP. So anyway, if you're not a Southern fan, in fact, a lot of Southern fans don't get it, and I'll explain why I say that in a minute. But if you're a Southern fan, it's like you're part of the club. Like someone says that, you know what it means, or how to respond or whatever. And I don't know how to respond. You probably do, but I remember one time I saw this. I was walking by this guy. He was wearing a Southern Miss shirt, and I said, "To the top," and he looked at me like I had gone crazy. Like I don't think he'd ever heard that in his life. But he was like, in his 50s or 60s. It struck me afterwards that he was probably like a parent of a student and had no idea, what that was. Since we've been talking about Southern Miss, explain what I missed about that, and if you know either the history or the reason why that is, why don't you share that?
The To the Top, it's part of the Southern Miss Fight Song.
Okay.
And that's where it comes from. I mean, they come up with this whole mythology behind it. Since then, I talk about eagles to the fly to the top, and stuff. But it was part of the fight song, and they needed a chant, and it worked. So that's what they went with, and the name Southern Miss Golden Eagles is not that old. It's 72, I think, is when.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Southern has had quite a few names over the years. They started out with Mississippi Normal College, and they were called the Normals or Normies. They've had the previous name before the Eagles was the Southerners. So I think it was 72 is when they had a student vote and they picked the Eagles. So when they wrote everything, they Southern Miss to the top, so that's where all that started was back then.
Well, if it was 72, if it was in fact 72, that would have been the year that my father started at Southern. Because the fall of 72 would have been when he started. So that's interesting if that's when that happened. And that was Southern Miss was actually the Rock, as they call it, was my first college stadium. I remember I was in 4th grade, and I was so excited because Dad was going to let me miss school on Friday. We were going to drive up to Southern to watch them play. I kind of think they were playing Houston that night, but I can't really remember because I was in 4th grade. And that was like
long
30.
Time ago.
Yeah, it was 30 years ago. So,
Yeah.
but I just remember thinking how cool it was. But I also remember thinking, and I don't know how different the stadium is now, but back then, it just looked like a huge high school stadium. You had 2 sets of stands. You had one on each sideline, but they went way up, and they were steep. And on one end was like the scoreboard and where the teams came out, and the other end was a chain link fence. Now, I'm sure that the stadium looks far better than that now. I mean, that was, I said, that was 30 years ago. But they've
closed that part in.
Okay.
In fact, my seats are in that closed in part now.
Yeah.
In the end zone.
What's funny is the last time I was there, I went with my dad. I think you might have been at this game too. Were you at the Boise State game?
Probably was.
Would have been 2014, 15, something like that.
Yeah, I probably was. If I wasn't, I was at work. But that would have been.
Well, when I was there, I I remember thinking that the stadium looked totally different, and I think we were on the opposite sideline that we were the first time. But yeah, it looked, it was like a totally different stadium. So that's that's cool. Well, awesome. This has been great, and we're rocking and rolling. As a matter of fact, NFL preseason week 2 kicked off tonight. And then a week from Saturday, we have the week 0 games. So we have official real live football. The Little League World Series, which, of course, if you've been following us for any time, I live my off-season life through milestones, and the Little League World Series is well underway, and that is the final barrier between us and football season. And so, being a huge NFL and college fan, my yearly life starts in college football week 2, because that's the week NFL kicks off. So that's when it's like every day but Tuesday and Wednesday you have bona fide football. And that's just for the first month and a half. Then you have your 50 games in 50 days or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are really getting close to it. So that's awesome. Gosh, I
action
love
on-
fall, man. Yeah.
Yeah. I've kind of over the years been a fan of MAC, football, just because it's on Tuesday nights, and it's an exciting brand of football. It's not the greatest brand to watch, but it's exciting, and you get like Toledo and Central Michigan playing, and it's 15 degrees outside. You're like, this is crazy to watch, but it's a lot of fun. It's Tuesday night, and it's killing some time for me. So
yeah. Well, what I've realized is that the games that I love to watch in the mid-major realm, like that aren't like games that I would watch anyway, if the broadcast is quality, because ESPN's got a pretty big variance in their quality.
They do.
Like if you watch, like, the SEC network has come a long way. They're a lot better than they used to be. But there are some ACC network games that you watch and you're like, dude, what is this? Like, it feels like you're watching it in SD and they pulled the guys off the street and they've never heard of the teams. I mean, so like if the Thursday night or Wednesday night or Tuesday night, whatever broadcast of Maction or whatever it may be is a quality broadcast. So like, let's say like a C tier crew, Saturday crew running the show on Thursday or Wednesday or whatever, then it's usually really compelling and I like to watch it. Mm-hmm. But if it's two teams I don't necessarily care about and the broadcast is terrible, it's like, it's hard to watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
those
exciting.
those early week games are like the Tuesday, Wednesday. That's where they let the announcing teams kind of cut their teeth and stuff, so that they know not as many people will be watching those games and stuff unless you're a fan of the team or you're just bored flipping through the channels. So
well,
that's where a lot of those guys get their reps.
What I would rather them do is put their new guys who are green on like your ACC network, SEC network 11 o'clock game, which is going to be traditionally like your lowest window of choice, right? So like for the SEC that has the contract with ESPN, their top 4 games their top 5 games are ABC and ESPN. So they've got 3 windows on ESPN and 2 windows on ABC. So 6, 7, and 8 are your SEC network games. So your lowest tier game is going to typically be SEC network. Probably the same for ACC, something similar. I'd rather than put those guys there, where you're only going to watch it like if it's your team probably, and put guys like the crew with Andre Ware, put them on Maction. Because here's the thing. I don't super love Andre Ware. I think he says some weird things, but he's good enough and experienced enough that I can tolerate watching a broadcast of his. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there are guys that make a lot more money than me that make those decisions. But yeah, so real quick, and then I promise I'll let it go. I'm just excited about football. So I'm sitting at lunch today, and one of my coworkers it was me and two female coworkers were sitting at lunch eating, and they were talking about, fall. And the one female coworker, she and I have very like similar like sensibilities and like likes and dislikes and whatever. The other one goes, and she was saying like, yeah, I'm not really into like the pumpkin stuff, and then the other girl goes, yeah, what the thing that for me that just makes fall is just a maple donut and black coffee. I mean, that is fall for me. I looked at her and I said, I don't know where you grew up. I do know where she grew up, but I said, I don't know where you grew up. But for me, fall is smelling meat on the smoker and hearing CBS in the background. That's fall. And then the other girl who's similar to me starts laughing, and she's like, yeah, that's definitely, because she's a big football fan. The other one's kind of a, whatever, but towards sports. But I just thought that was really funny because it's like, man, we have very different definitions of fall, because that, fall to me is you walk outside and you smell a little crisp in the air, and then you walk inside. And, oh, by the way, we didn't get to do this yet, but I don't even know how you feel about this show. ESPN around 2004, 2005 started a string of mid-afternoon original shows. Some of those were like Jim Rome is Burning and a couple others. A lot of them died fairly quickly or within a few years. But two that have stood the test of time are Pardon the Interruption and Around the Horn. And Around the Horn has been officially canceled by ESPN. And that, I'm going to tell you, that makes me sad because I didn't watch it a lot, but I liked it when it was on. And now let me back up. I didn't watch it a lot in recent years. I used to watch it every day. I loved Around the Horn. It was my absolute favorite show, like all the way back to when Max Kellerman was the host, which was like way back. So I just thought I'd mention that because one of the things I was getting ready to say, you feel that nip in the air, then you walk inside on a weeknight and you turn on Around the Horn and jump into PTI. Well, you can't turn on Around the Horn anymore because they've gotten rid of it. And I get it. I mean, the show lasted probably 23 or 24 years, so it's not like they didn't give it a fair shake. I mean, I think it had its run, but that one hit home for me. That was a tough one.
Yeah. I used to like it too. I remember Woody Page was on Cold Pizza, and would do the First and 10 segments with Skip Bayless.
Skip Bayless, yep.
Yeah, and then he moved over to Around the Horn, and was kind of like their main journalist on there for a long time.
Well, they were. I mean, the guests were all journalists, but
but he was kind of like their main one that would, like, the others would change out, but he would.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see. Yeah, he was on most days. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember because they've been doing a farewell stuff with that for a while, and I actually got to see the episode that he was on where they were doing the farewell with him on there, and I think what's his name, Josh, or whatever, like the guy that's been the host for the last few years, awarded him.
Wait, you talking about Tony?
Is it Tony?
Yeah,
I can't remember the guy's name. Yeah.
What's his last name?
Anyway,
Go ahead.
I was thinking his name was Josh, but yeah. He awarded him a ton of points and made him the winner of the day just because it was, his last appearance on the show officially, and I was like, man, that's kind of, it really hits you there, that, oh man, I was watching this in college and now,
Yeah.
And Woody still looks a lot the same as he did back then. I mean,
yeah, just a little skinnier and a little wrinklier, but yeah. It was Tony Reale. So I don't know if he was still doing this in recent years, but what they used to do, and I know you remember this, they would do Around the Horn. It was the last of, like, they had like a 2-hour window, and it was the last one, and then they would move into PTI, which would segue into SportsCenter. But Tony Reale would come on at the end of PTI and read off their mistakes.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if he did that in the last few years, but I always thought that was really cool because he'd do his live show.
That's where he got to start, because he was doing that when Max Kellerman was still hosting Around the Horn.
Okay.
Was
Max Kellerman only hosted, for like a season or two, right? It was not a long time.
Yeah, I don't remember how long, but that's the Reality got to start with PTI as the mistakes guy, and he would kind of buzz in every now and then during the show. But if I remember right, that's where he got to start, was on there.
Yeah. So yeah, it says Tony Reale started in 2004, and the show started in 2002. So Max Kellerman had 2 seasons, and then Reale had 21.
Wow.
4,953 episodes. You almost wish just go one more season and get over 1,000, but whatever. Or get over 5,000, not 1,000.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've gone really long, but I enjoy this because we're kind of getting ready for football, and we're not exactly sure when it's going to be, but our next episode is going to be a look ahead at the college football season to come, and we are going to, in some capacity, do a preview, whether that's sharing our personal preseason polls, or maybe we'll do some win totals for select teams. I don't know. We haven't discussed the nuts and bolts, but what we do know is that football's here. You should get excited. Thank you guys for joining us. And Quacker, where can people find the show? Where can people find you?
Okay. So before I do that, I'm gonna just say your coworker with her donut choice, spot on. I love a maple donut too.
That's fine. That just doesn't define fall. I'm not.
No.
If you want to make a maple donut, go for it. I mean that I'm not judging that. I just anyway.
Yeah, I like a maple donut any time of year. So not just fall.
I don't know if I've ever had a maple donut. So.
Oh, they're awesome. Yeah. So you can find the show on Facebook. Just search for Loveland House Podcast. You can find us on X at Loveland House Pod. You can find us on YouTube, which is where you're watching us now. We also have most of the audio podcast streaming services. We are part of those. You can find me on X at Marty Quacker.
And you can find me at MATTHEWWBROWN on X. That's Matthew with 2 extra W's, BROWN, brown like the color. And once again, thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you next time.